work that he does. As an assistant professor of sports media and communications for the University of Nebraska Lincoln's College of Journalism and Mass Communications, Brian helps to develop the next generation of sports broadcasters. But important to all of us today, Brian has studied challenges presented by legalized sports betting and the media, where he's had his findings published and presented. I've been fortunate enough to visit his classrooms, and now I kind of wish I could get a degree through the J School at UNL. Brian's insights and data regarding sports betting and the media are extremely valuable, and I look forward to hearing more about it today. And with that, I turn it over to Brian.
All right, Mike, thank you so much. I will share my screen here and get rolling. How is that looking to everyone? Good? Good enough? Okay, good enough. Sometimes good enough is good enough. Okay, so I'm going to talk about responsible, specifically sports gambling, as Mike noted. My background is in sports, and that's what I teach at UNL. So this will let me advance. There we go. So this is a very brief overview of what I'll be doing here. So I'm going to talk why sports betting, why sports gambling, and why in the classroom. I'll tell you a little bit about me, which also dovetails in with how I got here. Some theoretical influences that I've kind of dug up through my research into sports betting and how that informs what I do in the classroom. And I'll take you through a dedicated class that I've had the opportunity to teach twice now, and that's sports betting and the media. Some really interesting insights out of that, which I'll get into later. And then I'll talk about also integrating this topic into existing classes that are not sports betting specific. And then at the end, again, I'll share a little bit of data. At the end of the semester, I have administered a very brief survey, and it's revealed some pretty interesting statistics from the students that have taken this class. So I will talk about that, and then also, of course, welcome your comments and questions. Always looking to improve this class and think of new ways to engage the students. So we'll get into that too. But first, why sports betting? Three main reasons. First of all, it's kind of the shiny new thing when it comes to gambling. As some of our panelists have mentioned already, in 2018, the Supreme Court struck down the federal ban on sports betting. So now, since that time, 38 states have joined Nevada in legalizing some form of sports betting. Most places that includes online. Here in Nebraska, it's in person only. Regardless, we're talking about an industry that has generated $150 billion wagered legally each year on sports. So very much a shiny new thing, and it's kind of everywhere. Along with this, though, with the legal market, is a rampant emergence of what we call gray markets. So that includes daily fantasy, things like Prize Picks and Underdog, which are not categorized as sports betting and not regulated in the same way. Similarly, sweepstakes apps like Fliff, that one's really interesting and one that a lot of students are using. And then the new one on the block is the prediction markets, specifically a company called Kalshi, which garnered some press and attention in November when they started to take bets on the election, on the actual election in the United States, and they had the green light to do so from a regulatory standpoint. And they got a lot of attention because they had Donald Trump at about a 61% to win the election, whereas most of the polls had it about 50-50. And so Kalshi is now touting itself as this new beacon of truth, in a greater source of truth than polls. But they've recently started to offer predictions on the outcomes of sporting events. And again, this is not regulated as sports betting, and it's available to those who are under the age of 21. And then the final one, which has been touched on, I think, a little bit in some of our other presentations, including the previous one with Matt. It's the I know sports approach towards this form of gambling. It's familiarity. We've played it. We played Little League. We played, soccer. We played other sports, maybe up through high school, perhaps even into college. So we think that we know sports. We also watch a lot of sports on TV, sports programming. We're on our apps and online and consuming a lot of media around sports. So we think that we're experts. And so that, as I say, it seduces us. It seduces us as bettors into believing that we're going to be successful on betting on game outcomes, quote, because we know sports. So that's three reasons why I'm drawn to this topic and what I try to address in the class. So first, a little bit about me. My background is in sports media. I spent 8 years doing play-by-play in minor league baseball, another 7 years as a sports information director and broadcaster in college sports. So I've seen the professional side, I've seen the amateur side. And in 15 years of covering sports, not once did I publicly discuss sports betting. Uh, all of my experience was prior to 2018, I should note. So it was something that we did not talk about. Now everybody talks about it on every station, and that's kind of fascinating to me. My only real brush with gambling that I saw in person was 2005. I was working for the minor league baseball team in Vero Beach, Florida. That's also at the time where the Dodgers were holding their spring training. So during spring training, I worked with the Dodgers publicity office, and so that granted me access pretty much everywhere. And hey, what's going on during March in the United States? It's March Madness, the basketball tournaments. Everybody fills out their brackets, right? So I'm in the Dodgers locker room and I'm seeing more cash with my own eyes than I've ever seen in my entire life being traded on the NCAA tournament and the brackets that they had going on here. And it blew my mind. And I couldn't believe this was going on in a Major League Baseball locker room. So it's been around even before the legalization. A little bit about my education. Earned my bachelor's at KU, my master's from Oklahoma State, and my PhD from University of Oklahoma. Now I teach at Nebraska. So as I like to joke, I'm trying to bring back the Big Eight Conference. So we're going to have this conference realignment. Let's go back to the good old days. A little bit more specifically about how that education has directed my career path and my research interests. So in August of 2016, I start my master's program in Stillwater, Oklahoma, and I had to come up with a topic for a paper. This was my first master's class. It was a research theory class. And so I needed a topic. Well, about this time, the picture in the bottom right-hand corner there, that's me with a couple of my friends who started our first fantasy football league in 1994 when we were all freshmen in college. And this September will be the 31st anniversary of our league. We've kept it intact for 31 years. We have never played for money. We never will. But it's been a social glue for us. That gentleman on the right is Colonel Strack, who spent 20 years in the Marines. He once famously zoomed or got online for a fantasy football draft in the wee hours of the morning from Africa while he was stationed abroad. That's how seriously we took the draft. But it's kept us intact for all of these years. But I thought this was really kind of a fascinating thing. And as it turned out, there was some research on fantasy sports in the United States, and I thought, wow, we can do this for a career. This is a research path, and so it's turned into a fruitful area for me, and that leads to some things that I've researched. And again, this all ties into to how I construct the class and why. So these theoretical influences. Out of my master's program, the timing was immaculate. So I started in 2016, 2018, May of 2018 is when the Supreme Court decision came down that snuffed out the federal ban on sports betting. And so within a few weeks of that decision, I gathered a series of focus groups of people who had played fantasy sports and tried to get their takes on what does this mean now that sports betting is going to be legalized in a lot of places. So it kind of came at it from a social cognitive theory perspective, which is very, very big on observational learning. So we learn from our friends, we learn from our family, and yes, we learn from media. And so that was the angle that I took on that one. My dissertation for my PhD program was this one, and it was looking at framing and sourcing of the legalization of sports betting in the U.S. So, when looking at how is sports betting covered from 1992, when the federal ban on sports betting was implemented, to 2018, when the Supreme Court decision came down, and the change in tone was extraordinary. In the early 90s, it was all about we need to protect our children. We can't have our athletes being seen as poker chips. We must protect the integrity of the games. We can't have game outcomes being questioned, and that will happen if we have widespread legalized sports betting. Well, what happened by 2018 is that the tone had almost completely flipped. Those concerns were no longer at the forefront. What was being reported on, this is going to create jobs. This is going to create needed tax dollars for states that are starving in their budgets. Um, it was described by one congressman as a tax that people line up to pay. So people have smiles on their face as they're placing their bets and paying taxes. And so it's rather attractive to both sides of the aisle. You know, we seem to be in a political climate where we can't agree on much of anything, but remarkably, legalization of sports betting is one that both sides were pretty happy to take on. And so you know, that certainly has an impact on how we view sports betting when our primary media outlets are framing it in a very different manner. A couple of other studies that are kind of ongoing. One that I'm starting now is specific to college students and responsible gambling messaging. We're doing an online experiment to test a few things there. Responsible gambling in ESPN betting shows. So this one, a colleague and I went through 45 episodes of ESPN's dedicated sports betting program called ESPN Bet Live, and we developed a typology of the responsible gambling language that's used. And it's very heavy on responsible gambling, not on problem gambling or gambling disorder. In fact, there was virtually no mention of gambling disorder whatsoever. So we found some ways that they are maybe trying to be or present gambling in a responsible way, but there is certainly extraordinary room for growth in that area. And then one other kind of fun one we did was looking at social media responses to a couple of large and high-profile suspensions due to betting. So Calvin Ridley, an NFL All-Pro wide receiver, was suspended for a year. Ivan Toney, who was referenced in the last presentation, over in the UK, he was suspended for 8 months. And so we got to look at responses, differences between the US, where sports betting is relatively new as a legal entity, and the UK, where it's been legal for decades, and also athlete mental health. So Calvin Ridley was expressed that he was dealing with very deep depression at the time that he placed his bets. Ivan Toney confessed to a gambling addiction. So two kind of different types of mental health issues there. But all of these things kind of inform how I approach sports betting and the sports betting in the media class. Um, you see a lot of activity here on this page. Again, ESPN has its own sports book now. The Better Collective there on the left-hand side of the page, that's a media company that has several different entities underneath it that are betting focused or gambling focused in terms of content. VSiN up there in the top right-hand corner, the Musburgers started this one almost immediately after the Supreme Court decision came down. It's a 24-hour a day, 7-day a week sports betting programming. Some of it's live, some of it's recorded, but it was the first one fully dedicated to sports betting, a network. And then FanDuel TV, FanDuel being one of the most, or in fact, the most profitable legal sports book in the country. They have the naming rights for some regional sports networks, but they also have their own TV network, which is mostly, you can find it on their website. That's the most prominent place to see it, but it is available on some other streaming services. So, understanding this, what we call kind of the media ecology that has embraced sports betting, that's why we felt like there was a need for this class. And so we named it Sports Betting and the Media. So it kind of touches on three primary areas this course does. One